LittleBigPlanet was much more than just a silly little PlayStation game. To many, it was a creative outlet and demonstrated just how powerful user-generated content can be. It was one of PlayStation's most iconic and cherished franchises, but when it came time to say goodbye, it didn't get the proper send-off it deserved. If you haven't heard the news, Sony recently shut down the online servers for LittleBigPlanet 3 on PlayStation 4. Nowadays, video game server shutdowns are unfortunately way more common to see, especially with older games from the PS3 and now even PS4 era. This server closure in particular though was pretty devastating to see unfold. I mean, there was zero warning prior to its announcement, and it was very obvious that Sony wanted to quickly move on like nothing even happened. It felt like a slap in the face to fans who invested countless hours on LBP over the past decade and a half. I understand that maintaining servers for older games like this are costly and can be hard to do, but the lack of communication and transparency from Sony was inexcusable, and it's honestly just straight up insulting to their own legacy. I mean, come on Sony, it's LittleBigPlanet, the same game that helped you tremendously during the PS3 generation. If you remember, the PS3 struggled to sell for its first 2 years, and LittleBigPlanet was one of the main reasons you came back on top. It was so successful that Sackboy was practically like PlayStation's mascot for the rest of the generation. You marketed this game like crazy. You put so much effort into pushing this new and creative IP at the time, and for what? To cement its legacy by destroying over 10 million user-created levels. To announce its demise in a hastily put together Twitter post. 16 years, and that's how it ends? You gotta understand why I'm upset, right? LittleBigPlanet was a series that did so much for Sony, yet when it came time for them to decide its fate, they pulled the plug with little to no hesitation. I know LBP has been going through a rough patch in the past few years. Back in 2021, Sony disabled access to the LittleBigPlanet servers on PS3 and PS Vita. That was a huge loss, and we didn't even know the servers were shutting down beforehand. But what you might not know is that we technically didn't lose those servers. The only thing that Sony really did back then was disable the ability to connect to them. LBP 3 on PS4 still ran on those same old servers. That's why you were still able to play all of the old community levels and other user-generated content from LBP 1 and LBP 2. The PS Vita game is sadly an exception, as that ran on separate servers, but that's besides the point. Sony shut down the actual game servers for LBP on April 19th, 2024, making 10 million levels completely inaccessible and abandoning a 16-year-long community. Of course, there were signs pointing towards the game's eventual shutdown, such as an increase in more malicious server exploits, but the way Sony handled it was just straight up awful. I get that Sumo Digital hasn't worked on LittleBigPlanet 3 since 2017, Media Molecule hasn't worked on the game since LittleBigPlanet 2, whoever they got to work on the game's server issues was probably a contractor or some Sony employee unrelated to Sumo and MM. I am not blaming them. I also get that doing more for LBP was probably not worth it from a business perspective. Whatever. But it deserved better than to be unceremoniously dumped into a digital graveyard with so many other online games. I'm not a programmer or developer, I'm not even gonna pretend like I know anything about coding, but even I know that there were potential solutions there that could have been taken to lessen the impact of this server shutdown. I don't know, maybe giving us advance notice would be nice, or allowing players to archive their creations before taking away the ability to do so. Even just having access to our own Earth profiles would have done so much for the community. I cannot even begin to think of the amount of people that used their Earth as a place to store costumes, objects, and unfinished levels in order to prevent data loss from potential profile corruptions. A profile corruption that is very common, by the way. Thank you, LBP3. But regardless, there were solutions there, and I'm just a bit disappointed with the way things went. This was one of my favorite games of all time, man. Like, not LBP3 in particular, but LBP as a whole. I just wish Sony hadn't turned their back on it. With all that being said, there is a silver lining here. When Sony decommissioned the LBP3 servers, they actually kept the Resources server online. That server is what holds all of the level data and profile data. Now, this can mean absolutely nothing, as the resources server could randomly go offline at any point, but this does mean that none of those levels are technically deleted, and can all still be publicly archived if Sony chooses to do so. I don't think they care, but it can't hurt to make your voice heard, right? Well, recently there's been a fan-made petition put out that was solely created to help preserve a significant part of LittleBigPlanet history. With over 1,000 signatures at the time of making this video, fans are urging Sony to release a public, downloadable archive of LBP's user-created levels. If you want to sign it yourself, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Even if nothing comes of this, I wouldn't worry too much, as it's pretty likely that a good chunk of those levels have already been archived by the community. There's also private servers such as LittleBigRefresh and Beacon that currently hosts a lot of archived levels from the official servers already. One way or another, LittleBigPlanet will live on even if Sony tries to take it from us. Thanks for watching. If you like this discussion, feel free to subscribe for more. I've been pretty motivated to just talk about LittleBigPlanet post-server shutdown, and I have a lot more to say, so expect more LBP discussions in the very near future. I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.